of Cultivate. Thank you for joining us today on another conversation. I am happy to be with our guest today. Her and I met under very similar life circumstances. And so we've talked about this topic for a long time now, and I thought it would be amazing to have her join us today and talk a little bit about feeling inadequate. Feeling inadequate, whether that's in life, that's in your career, that's as a mom, whatever the case might be. How do we navigate the thought of feeling inadequate? And this is a dear friend of mine. Thank you, Dani, for joining us today on the podcast. I am excited to have you. I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful you're here with us today.
And I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Aww. So let's just go straight for it. When you and I met, well, we met a little bit before this, but you were dating Philip, who's our one of our executive pastors, or youth pastor right now. And shortly after that, you guys get married, and he was already the youth pastor. And so now you jump into this that's absolutely new to you. Mm-hmm. You were new to church as well. Mm-hmm. How long have you been going to church for at that time?
At that time, I was probably going to church for about a year and a half, just kind of in and out, being like really to myself, didn't really want to meet anybody. So it had been about a year and a half. Fairly new to church.
So then you start dating Philip, you get married, he's a youth pastor now, you join him in ministry, and this is all new to you. Mm-hmm. I mean, from faith to now ministry as a whole, everything is brand new. And I remember us having a conversation one afternoon, or I don't even remember, and you telling me how you basically felt inadequate for the job or the task or the call that was now in your hands. And you were telling me these things, and I felt like you were describing me years before that. And it's a beautiful thing in a sense, because, nothing ever happens by chance.
Right.
And I feel like me having been in your shoes, identical shoes, gave me an opportunity to now speak into your life a little bit and kind of help you navigate a little bit, maybe not make it easier, but just kind of let you know that you weren't alone and you weren't weird because of it. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things we talked about was you feeling like Philip was called for this. He's qualified. He's got all it takes, and it's just in your eyes, it comes so easy for him. But here you are struggling in your role. Walk us a little bit through what was going on in your mind. What were you struggling with? How'd you feel? Why'd you feel inadequate?
No, yeah, absolutely. And I was, again, very thankful that we could relate on that, because I did feel alone. Yeah. When him and I first met, he was very clear that he wanted to be in ministry. But I think that my understanding of ministry was so different. Yeah. I just thought, okay, it's God. It's everything God. It's helping people for God. And that was my heart. So I'm like, yeah, I'm all about it. So in the context of church, I really did not know what I was signing up for. And coming from like a background where, I did grow up like Christian. It was more Catholic. And then we started kind of seeking the Lord in like different ways. We did start going to a Christian church, but then I kind of rebelled and went crazy, whatever. Long story short, when I came back to Christ and to church, I wanted to do ministry, but I didn't know what it looked like. And so my expectations were totally different than what I actually lived. Yeah. Seeing him in the way that he did ministry, his leadership, all of the sacrifice, and then even other women in ministry was really intimidating to me, because I felt, again, inadequate. I felt like I wasn't enough. I felt like I didn't know enough. I felt like I wasn't smart enough. Like all of these insecurities just kind of overwhelmed me. And I had to just kind of keep showing up and trust the process. But I feel like I really had no idea what I said yes to. Yeah.
It reminds me of me when I met Alex. Mind you, he's been in church his whole life. He's seen his parents do this. He served in church. I grew up in church, but it was different. It was a Catholic church. Yes, we served. But it was very different. Mm-hmm. And so for me now, I meet this guy. He's been doing this forever. And now he tells me, all I want to do with my life is serve God. And to me, it's the same thing. Yeah, sure, me too. Like, I'll sign up for that. I want to serve God for the rest of my life, and it's great. Never imagining the journey ahead. Like, I never knew about, I didn't know at that point, like, the fullness of what it meant to be a pastor, what it meant to work at church, what it meant to run a church, lead a church. Like, it's all new to me. And then suddenly you're like dropped into this, and you're like, and I think the thing or the lie is that that I felt, that I think you felt as well, is feeling like they're called and they're equipped, but we're not, because our circumstances are different. And one of the things that I've come to realize and learn is that it's not that we're not called or equipped or qualified, it's just in a different way.
Right.
And in that whatever we think we lack is actually a strength, which is what I've come to find out. It's like there's a strength that I bring because I didn't live through this, because I didn't, do this, because I didn't experience this. And there's power in that. And so how did you navigate that feeling? Like, how did you keep showing up? Because I think that there's people who maybe they're not feeling inadequate in a sense of being in church or, ministry per se, but maybe they're feeling inadequate as a mom.
Right.
Maybe they're feeling inadequate as a business owner, as, in their career. So how did you keep showing up even when it was difficult, and even when you felt like you had nothing to bring to the table? Right.
No, I hear you. I mean, I think that, it applies to all things, right? Like, it's just like this deep-rooted insecurity that you're not enough. In church and at work, anywhere, even with my friends and family, new friends. I feel like when you first become a Christian, you have to just kind of let go of a lot of the old friendships that you have and a lot of the old habits that you do. And so you enter this new kind of season of your life where you feel like, there's a lot of shame and you don't feel adequate and all that. And I just felt like it was just a part of that journey that God walked me through, that I had to remain obedient. And I think that that's where he continued to bless me, where he, showed me like, you have to get uncomfortable. You have to keep showing up because this is how I'm growing you. This is how I'm stretching you. And actually it's crazy because in a span of like 3 years, the Lord just like led me through all of these crazy life changes that like required a lot of this being uncomfortable, being scared, but just trusting the process. And looking back, I'm like, my goodness, I'm so thankful that, that he developed that grit and that like resilience to keep showing up. And I've learned, like you said, that just because our husbands do ministry in this color blue, it doesn't mean that that's the way that we have to fit in.
Yeah.
And even like with comparing yourself with like other women in ministry too, like, God just calls you because of who you are, and you have to be true to that, because that's how he's going to reach more people. Not everybody is going to listen to this person, but they might listen to you, So I kind of just began to trust him more and to lean into these phases that he kept calling me to. Just being uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I would say it's been a beautiful journey to see you navigate that, because I feel like I've been able to witness you go from maybe being doubtful and unsure about your place and this, to now see you comfortable and who you are. And so one of the things we tell you all the time, like whenever we have Flourish, and I'm like, hey, why don't you host? And you would overthink the hosting moment. And it's like, no, I want you to host because you bring a unique perspective. You are an artist. And so your view of life is like pretty, and I feel like in your mind there's like colors and butterflies, and like, you express yourself in that way that I can't, because that's not who I am, that's not how I think. And so there's nothing wrong with you, but I love that you've tapped into who you are and the way that God made you, because it does speak to people in a way that I can't speak to them. There's someone that listens to you and feels like, okay, I can connect with that person. And so it's been awesome to see you.
Thank you.
Go through that.
And I'm just so thankful that I feel like you've been a tool in my life to lead me in that, that trusting and that being bold and that like facing my fear and trusting the Lord. It really does require a lot of dying to yourself, because again, when you were like, oh, you want to host Flourish, I literally wanted to like dig a hole and be like, no, I don't exist. Like, please, no. But I did feel like God was like, Diana is asking you, but I'm calling you.
Yes.
Like, I'm calling you through her. And so it became bigger than me. It became bigger than the situation. And I just felt like, okay, God, like, I do this for you. And I feel like as you mature in your walk, like, you start realizing that it's less about you. It's more about him. It's having your eyes fixed on him. They could be a crowd full of 10 or 20 or even 1,000,
Yeah.
but you kind of see like kind of above what's around you, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's not always rainbows and butterflies, but it definitely is a journey that I feel that he calls us to.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that doing things even when we feel uncomfortable in doing them, because sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves. And I think one of the things that we need to come to terms with is that regardless of whatever it is in life that's making us feel inadequate, if God placed us there, for example, I can think of someone who might be feeling inadequate in their role as a mom, right? That is a God-given role. That is something that God has entrusted you with. And so it's putting our eyes, like you said, off of ourselves and saying, well, God, if you put me here, if you brought me to this point, it's because you're going to help me go through it. It's because you're going to give me the tools that I need to move forward. And so I can think of many times where for me, I felt that way. I felt like, oh God, but I have nothing to say. What am I going to say? How am I going to sound? How am I, even the podcast, I talk about it all the time. You second guess yourself so much. For me, out of a struggle with trying to do everything perfect and good enough. And so many times we stop God from doing certain things in our lives because we question ourselves so much. Instead of just saying, okay, God, it's about you. It's not about me. It's not about my, how good I can do something, how qualified I am. Is that if you called me, you got me,
That's right. That's right. And like you said, and it applies like even to being a mom. Like we're both new moms, babies don't come with like a guide or whatever.
Yeah.
You take them home and it's like,
you hope for the best.
One of my biggest fears was like, am I going to be a good mom? And I wrestled with that. And, somebody told me like the fact that you're questioning that already makes you a good mom. And I'm also reminded of like, how God over and over again, like he takes the little bit and he multiplies it and he makes it enough, right? Yeah. So like being a mom, like God called you to be that child's mom.
Yeah.
Because he knew your character, and he knows what she needs to develop from you. And also it made me think about family and how like we're so not in control. Like it really isn't about us, it's like God called the family that's around her too, and that's going to help shape her and grow her as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like it's just bringing your little bit and like watching him work through that.
And I think about, now that you mentioned that, I think about in the Bible, all these stories of what God did with people who did incredible things were people who did not have what it takes, right? Like I think of someone like Moses, who had to go and, speak to Pharaoh, who had to go and do all these things, and he would stutter. It's like, talk about that. You can't speak, but here I am doing these things. And so it's reminders that God picks people who are seemingly unable or don't have the skills or are not qualified enough to do something. And he picks those people because that's exactly how he shows his power. Yes. That's exactly how he's like, it's not about you. You could be at whatever, but it is because of me and in my strength that I can help you do great things. And it's a beautiful thing to feel like, I'm not perfect. I'm not good enough, but God.
Right. Right. I love that.
Even thinking of like you talking about comparing yourself, I think that when you feel inadequate about something, it's easier to look around you and be like, well, but that person has that, or that person does this better, or that person, or if I only had that. And comparison would literally just rob you from everything. Like you won't have peace because you'll be comparing yourself to all kinds of people and thinking that they got it and they got something that you don't.
Right.
How did that play a part in like those moments in your life?
Yeah, no, it always messes with you. The enemy tries to steal your peace. And of course, he's going to put somebody in front of you that's doing it the way that you wish that you did, Yeah. And I think you just have to like I've learned that it's more about loving and appreciating what they've got, but also that doesn't mean that it takes away from what I have to offer as well. And it's not making it seem like I'm better than them because I can do this that they can't. I think it's just like where that like family and that sense of community comes into play, and where I started to even view the church in a different way. I used to think that church was a building and it was all of like, this is what I got to do and this is what I can't do. But it really did become this living family that I appreciated. Like, somebody's gift for overseeing is, we need that, but I don't have that gift. And that doesn't mean that I have to try to be like them. It means that I fill a gap that is needed somewhere else. And so it's just that sense of community, comparison definitely robs you of peace and of confidence. But I think it's just appreciating, loving, and also just being rooted in what God says that you are. I mean, it sounds very simple. It takes time.
It takes practice.
It takes a lot of surrendering. And just kind of trusting that God makes no mistakes, that He created you exactly how He wanted you to be, lacking in some ways as a gift because He wants you to depend on Him.
Absolutely. And I think of those moments where you find yourself feeling less than or not qualified enough, and thinking of the simplicity of what you just said. Oh, we got to trust God. It's like, it sounds so simple, but it's so difficult to put into practice. But you have to start somewhere. You have to start by acknowledging, okay, I'm here not out of my own doing per se, but because this is the place where God wants me. And showing up day after day, you show up and you're just faithful with whatever God has given you. And little by little, God continues to show up and show you the way and show you, what's next for you, and give you the strength to continue to do things. And, I think of maybe the woman that's watching and they have this business that they're running and they feel like, that person made it to that level and I haven't been able to. Or, as a mom, I'm failing in this area. And I just hope that today, as they hear us talking about this, that they would feel encouraged to just let God do what God does. And that you don't have to look like... I think some of the things that... Sometimes we think that it's even just women comparing with women. But I feel like at the beginning, Alex was the closest thing that I had to what I thought I needed to have. And so whenever I would have to speak on a Sunday or for Flourish, I would literally think about things like, I'm not that funny. I don't have... And now, years later, it's like I wasn't meant to be that funny because it's just not the way God made me. But He gave me this other set of things that is who I am. And so I have to, do that. And
but it's crazy you say that, because I think you're really funny, actually. You have your own way of being funny.
I do. I'm not boring. I'm fun. But
no, you're not. No, you're hilarious. When you speak and how you express yourself, it connects. I'm like, yes, maybe it's because I'm Latina or Colombian or whatever, or even girls, we just get it. But you're really funny. And so humor, again, Again, comparison.
But it's the little things. And so it's you could be comparing yourself to not just another woman, not someone that's even doing the same thing you're doing. And one of the things that I have found has helped me in that area, and I will be honest, I'm not someone that compares a lot. But I'll say what has helped me is that I simply purposely shut down those things that will get in the way. So for example, social media right now, huge. Everybody has social media. Everybody spends tons of time on social media. It's probably the place where you're more vulnerable to comparing yourself.
Right.
So what do? I'm so careful and particular with what and who I follow. Because if there's something that makes me feel less than, if something that makes me question myself in a way that it's not inspiring, but it's almost like you lack this, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
So it's even practical ways to put certain boundaries on things. Because nowadays, dude, you can get lost in social media and you think that the world and people are like this, and then it just highlights everything that you think you don't have.
Right.
I don't know if that's happened to you where you're like, oh, this person has it all together, or that person whatever, and you're like, I don't. And
Right. No, I mean, again, everybody's going to put the best version of themselves. I've heard Pastor Alex say, nobody's going to post when they're having an
argument with their spouse.
Yes. But absolutely, it's so easy just to kind of compare and be like, wow, they live this fabulous lifestyle. I I don't compare to that, you know? But I love that you mentioned boundaries, because that's also been something that I've had to do, that I've learned, is also setting boundaries with me, with like my thoughts and my emotions, because I tend to be a very overly emotional person and I used to be led a lot by my feelings. But I've learned that they're there as like your co-pilot. You know, we've heard this, like you just have to really give it to God and say, Lord, like, is this something that is coming from you, that I'm supposed to be feeling or thinking? Because if not, then take it away. With my thoughts, just because I think it doesn't make it real. You know, it could just be something dumb that the enemy's trying to implant in my mind. And so it's just kind of like, I guess, managing yourself a little bit more and creating those boundaries, and also loving yourself. I mean, I've started to appreciate myself more in the recent years, and just kind of, you know, give myself a little bit more of like a pep talk. Like, man, you got this. Like, being a mom is not easy. You did it. Being a pastor's wife is not easy, and it's not going to get any easier. But again, God called you to it. So you just have to trust that you are enough, and that he's for you.
I love that. I love that, because it's easy for us. It's kind of this thing that's innate in human beings to look out, but not really value what we do have. It's easy to point out what I don't have. I don't have this. I don't look like that. I don't, and just go down this whole path of what I lack. And rarely ever do we sit down and list the things that we do have, and the things that we do like about ourselves, the qualities that God has given us. And I think that gratitude, and that moment where we can just sit down with ourselves and say, hey, enough of putting yourself down, enough of, you know, doing this to yourself. Let's sit down and spend that same amount of time in contemplating the good things that you do have, because we all have good things. But it's easy. It's almost like this highlighting everything that's wrong and everything we think that sometimes it's like, it's not even as deep as we make it out to be. Honestly, it's just us. You know, we ruminate on these things for so long and they become bigger things. But it's like, when was the last time that we sat down and we thought about, okay, what do I bring to the table? What good things has God given me? You know, what are the qualities about me? What are the good things that and there might be someone watching today and they might feel like, I don't have many. Well, you might have one or two, but it's starting at a point where it's like, okay, I'm going to be intentional to, you know, turn down the noise and really spend some time with myself and see what's back. And I think especially women, we are so critical of ourselves. Like, if we think about, I'm just thinking this, if you go look at yourself in the mirror, what is the first thing you think about? Like, do you think about necessarily all the good things? But you know, my hair or whatever, or
right.
I don't
you
know
like nitpick yourself.
Yes. And we can be like our worst critics sometimes. We say things about ourselves and people haven't even thought about it. They're like, no way. And you look at it through like a magnifying glass and you think, you know, you're this and you're that. And so I think one of the ways that we can practically fight against that is through being grateful.
Absolutely. And I feel like I love that you've mentioned like taking little bits at a time too, because I think that sometimes we get so overwhelmed by the big picture, and suddenly from one day to the next I need to be loving myself and like believing in myself. No, it is going to take some time, and it's little by little. It's you know what, I actually like how my hair looks like today. Run with that. You know, it's just like taking little bites and having, you know, that attitude of gratitude. It really does make such a difference. Just being thankful. I
think breaking the mold of what we think we should be like, act like, sound like, look like helps. So I remember being younger and hearing, and you probably did too, this whole thing where it's like about relationships, and they say, okay, list, you know, all the qualities of the person you want to be with, and you go, and then they make you rip it apart because, you know, you're never going to find someone perfect, but God, I'm not saying that that's not good. I'm just thought it came to my mind if somebody uses that out there. But I think it's the same thing. There's this idea in our minds of the kind of woman we need to be like and look like, that often does not come from God, but from a made up idea of what the world has tried to sell us. You have to look like this. You have to sound like this. You have to have this type of family. And I think we need to reevaluate where that image or where that thought comes from. Like, who is dictating who and what you should be like?
Right.
Because many times it is not from God. It is not from what God says about you. It is from what we've learned along the way. It's from our experiences in the past. It's from our upbringing, our hurt, our pain, our trauma that has made us feel like, okay, this is taking a moment to sit down and be like, okay, but what does God say? Who does he say I should be like? And you and God defining that.
Right.
You know, I think that's a good tool for us to do, to say, okay, it's just God and I. Putting aside the distraction and saying, okay, who do I want to be? Who is God calling me to be, and redefining that and working towards that? Because I feel like we live in a world right now where it's a copy and paste.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said it, I was talking to somebody, and it's like, how boring that we've become a copy and paste.
Right.
That we have to look like this person, and not everyone looks like that. That this person did this, so now we all have to do that. And it's like, explore the beauty of individuality. Explore the beauty of being like, and I love that you do that so well in how you even like how you dress, how you carry yourself. You're an artist, so you like the little weird things, or like the pop of color, and you do things that other people probably wouldn't dare to do because you're afraid of not being, you know, in style with this or in tune with that. And I think I just love it. And I feel like that makes you so unique, that you're so in tune with that. And you're like, no, I love this. And I feel like we need to find that
Thank you.
in ourselves. Like, who are we really? And not be afraid of being that.
Yeah, I hear you. And I feel like that was also a very pivotal moment in my journey as I've become more secure in myself, is digging deep, you know, and not escaping. Like you mentioned, like a lot of our trauma and our upbringing tends to rule over us. And so it was really when I just literally surrendered, and I wasn't trying to run away from my pain and my past. I was like, what is my sadness trying to tell me? And I feel like that's when God was really like, he worked in me, you know, and I wasn't a victim anymore. I'm not a victim of my circumstances. You know, I have choices that I can make. And you kind of start building that resilience. But also with like expressing yourself, I've also learned that if you're connected to the vine, you know, not to sound super like Christianese, but if you're connected to the vine, like God is the creator of everything, and he created everything that is colorful and amazing. And so if he's your inspiration, right? And so I think that also culturally in Colombia, there's a lot of colors and the birds and the butterflies and all that. So that influences you. But I think it was just more like an act of worship in a way, where it's like, I'm going to be myself. I'm going to celebrate these colors. I'm going to do this and that because you inspired me to do this, and I'm just going to do it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. Finding who God made you to be. And I love that you put emphasis in the fact that it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
Because I feel like some of us might be under the impression that we see people and we often hear their story. Like we often hear, you know, I used to do this, or I used to be like this, or whatever. And then now we see them now and we think that it just happened overnight. And understanding and being gracious with ourselves to understand that is a process. It's a process of finding our identity in Jesus. It's a process of accepting it. It's a process of believing it. It's a process in putting it to practice, and then stepping out every day in that, which could be scary, which sometimes can be difficult. But I think that part of our walk with Jesus, part of it is that we are more often going to feel uncomfortable than we do comfortable. And I say this because our journey with God is one of constant change.
Absolutely.
And growth. And so if there's no stretching, there's no growth. If there's no pain, there's no growth. And so I would say, if you feel too comfortable in where you're at, I'll be like, well, have a conversation with Jesus, because maybe it's time to do something else. Maybe it's time to step in faith. Maybe it's time for you not to be comfortable. And so it's embracing the uncomfortable. It's embracing the unknown. It's embracing that, you know what, feeling out of depth in life sometimes, it's not as bad as we think, because that might just mean that we are taking that next step in our faith.
Right.
That we are taking that next step. And I feel like that we need to learn to embrace that.
Agreed.
So that we take every season as it comes with joy and like looking forward to it. Like, okay, I might feel out of depth. That just means that, God, this is a new season. God, this is a new, you know.
Absolutely. And I think that, absolutely, like even like the series of Glory to Glory, you know, what we started the year off with, it's so true. We go from glory to glory. God is always doing something new in us.
Yeah.
And we're constantly changing, like you said, and just being comfortable in the uncomfortable and almost thanking him for seasons of uncomfort.
Yeah.
Thanking him for difficulties, because there's got to be gold in that, you know. He's going to allow the butterfly to struggle out of the cocoon, you know, just so it could build resilience and fly.
Yeah.
And so it's like kind of finding that heavenly perspective to trust that God is in control, and that although you experience trauma or you're in a season of pain or things don't make sense, we just got to hang tight, you know, and have that grit and get back up. You fall 7 times, but you get up 8. Like, you just have to trust that God is not going to let it be like for nothing.
Yeah.
He's going to use it for good.
Yeah. And I love that you keep mentioning grit and resilience, because I feel that is something that we're lacking a little bit in today's generation. We went from, which I'm not saying it was good, but not sharing our feelings, not being able to be vulnerable and say how we feel, to now an oversharing, overdwelling in my feelings that has killed a little bit of that grit in people. Like, it's cool that we can identify what's hurting us, what's bothering us. And it's cool that we can say it and not feel ashamed by the fact that, hey, I might be depressed. Hey, I might be going through this. But I feel like we've turned a little bit too much towards this side, where it's like, I'm just going to bask in this depression and just going to talk about it all day. And I'm just going to, you know, that it's like, no, we have to go back a little bit this way and say, well, I might feel this way, but I'm going to fight. I might feel this way, but I'm going to do this. And I think that as women, that's exactly what God calls us to do. Yes, we have each other, and we talk about, you know, having a community, because it helps us. Like, you and I being able to have these conversations has helped both you and I. Having it with other people. But we need to have that attitude where it's like, this is not going to stop me. This is not going to keep me from doing what God wants me to do. This isn't going to keep me here in this hole, dying, crying, whatever. And I think it's time for us to look at our lives and be like, I'm not going to dwell on what I don't have, what I lack, whatever. And again, going back to gratitude, I'm going to think about those things that are good. Think about those things that God has promised for my life and move in that.
Right.
So what would you say to the person that's watching right now, and they are in that season right now where they can't see the good, where they hear you and I talking, and they might be like, well, it's easy for you to say because whatever. People sometimes think that we have great lives all the time. And it's like, no. But that person that maybe feels inadequate, out of depth, that maybe feels like you just don't understand. Life has been difficult. I can't see the good in my life right now. I can't see what God's trying to do. How would you encourage that person from your perspective and from your own journey to keep moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that practical tools like being grateful, you know, journaling, surrounding yourself with people, admitting things to other people, letting go a lot of that pain that you're holding on to and the trauma, not running away from it. Again, I think it's very easy just to numb it with distracting ourselves with shopping, with drinking, or even just like watching shows all day long, you know, not run away from it, but just kind of sit in it and let it almost lead you to get closer to God. God is there. He's not far in a distance, and he really is the one that's going to be able to give you that supernatural sort of fight and ability and hope to keep getting up and to push forward. I know it feels like it's the end of the world right now and there's no hope, but just know that you're not alone, that people care, people relate. Don't isolate. It's really important to stay in community.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because I think many times we think we can't, or that we're not going to be able to make it through, and it's because we've been doing it alone. Or maybe we don't have the right people around us. And so it's really looking in. We talk about community all the time at church, and I say this over and over and over. We don't just say it to say it. We don't just say it to promote something. We say it because it's how we've been able to get through some seasons in our lives where you can't see it, but I can see it in you. And so I'm going to tell you and I'm going to remind you. So I love that. I love that we could get to have one another, even hearing conversations like this that will make us feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one. Everybody struggles.
Right.
Everybody, regardless of who you might think that this is just the most confident, perfect person in the world. Everybody has struggled at one point or another.
Absolutely.
And everybody has felt inadequate. Everybody has felt out of depth in their lives. And so it's just removing this from our lives. It's like, you're not the only one. It's life, and we keep moving forward, and we have a good God who wants to help us.
Yeah, and even if you think things are great right now,
A
storm is coming. So it's like, that constant fight, that being uncomfortable, the just, overcoming. It makes me think also of like God's love for us and allowing us to go through pain because it's good for us, which is so crazy to think about. And it only made sense after being a mom.
Yes.
When you have to let your kid fall, or the doctor comes in to give them whatever, a vaccine, like when they're first born, or check their vitals. They're crying. They're like, Mom, why are you letting him do this? But it's just like, this is for your own good. Like, just trust the process. So it's just so wild to put yourself in those shoes that God's going to let you go through that pain because he's building that fight in you, and he's giving you that strength, the opportunity to outgrow.
Yeah.
So just have hope that it's not in vain.
I love that image because you'll never be in better hands than in the hands of a caring father who loves you, who wants the best for you. And it makes me think sometimes we think that, trying to get ourselves out of issues and problems and situations, we tend to run from God. And it's like, life will be life regardless of who you are, and life is difficult. So what a better way to go and navigate life than with God, who helps you and who's going to strengthen you and give you peace even in the worst of moments. It's like, I have a good father to run to. I have a good God that cares for me and helps me through seasons.
Yeah, learning to suffer with joy.
Yes, that's like so poetic, but it's yes, but it's possible. So thank you for having this conversation with me, for opening up about your own issues and struggles and things, because I think that all of us can really think about our lives and find a little bit of our story in your story. And I know that it's going to help a lot of people. So if you're watching and you are going through a season right now where you feel inadequate, you feel like you're not good enough, you don't have what it takes, maybe you're tired of showing up and you're tired of trying and you're tired of disappointment, we just want to encourage you today, as you hear this, let it just serve as a reminder and as a message from God that he's not done with you, that you do have what it takes. Whether you can see it right now or you don't see it, rest in the truth that you have a good God who has called you to do great things, who has called you to do a great work, who has plans for your life. And his word says that they're plans of hope, to give you a future, to give you something good. He is a good father who is not done with you. So we just want to encourage you today. I want to encourage you today to start putting into practice some of the things that you heard today. Start being grateful for the things that you do have. It might seem difficult at first to find those things, but spend some time with God and think about the fact that you are still alive, that there is still hope for your life, and begin to find and just identify those things that God has given you, the tools that you have. Find community, find good, godly people that can encourage you and speak into your life. Begin to look at your life through the lens that Jesus sees you through, of who you are, who he's created you to be. And I think that's a good place to start. And if God has you there, it's for a reason. Don't give up. Cultivate some grit and some resilience in your life. And you can leave us a prayer request. We'll pray for you. However it is that we can help connect you with community, we'd love to do that. And we'll be praying for you. Thank you for joining us on this conversation today. We love you, and we'll see you next time.